All right, welcome back everybody. Before we get started today, I want to review a little bit about what we talked about yesterday. Yesterday, we talked about the Great Wall of China. Do you remember who started construction on the Great Wall of China? Who caused it to be built? It was China's very first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, or Emperor Qin. Why did he want to build that Great Wall? Why did he want to build this? You're right, he wanted it as a form of protection from invaders. How did he plan to build that wall? How did Emperor Qin plan to build this wall? Right, if you remember, there were already some small protective walls all throughout China. His plan was to connect them into one great wall, which he called the Great Wall of China. Right, Qin Shi Huang is one of our leaders of ancient China, and he built the Great Wall of China. So to help us remember what he did and why it was important, I'm going to put this picture of the Great Wall under leaders. So you remember that it was China's very first leader, Qin Shi Huang, their first emperor, that caused that wall to be built. All right, my friends, we'll go over our vocabulary words, and we're going to learn about another important person in ancient Chinese history today. Example. An example is someone or something that serves as a model to be copied or followed. Patty wanted to follow her mother's example and become a well-known doctor. Sages. Sages are people known for their wisdom and judgment. Eager. Eager means to have great interest in something or to really want to do something. Stacy was eager to open her presents during her birthday party. Tell me about a time when you were eager to do something. The word eager is similar in meaning to several other words, but those words have a slightly different meaning. As we just learned, eager means that you really want to do something. The word willing is similar to eager, but if you are willing to do something, you are not as excited about it as you are if you are eager to do it. There is another word that is also similar. That word is impatient. If you are impatient for something to happen, you really, really want it to happen soon. I'm going to give you a few different situations, and I want you to tell me if you would be willing to do that thing, eager to do it, or impatient to do it. All right, our first one is celebrate your birthday. Would you be willing to celebrate your birthday, eager to celebrate your birthday, or impatient to celebrate your birthday? What about playing your favorite game with your best friend? Trying a new food for dinner. Reading a new book. And putting away your clothes. Today, we are going to learn about another influential or important person from ancient Asia. Long ago, in the Chinese kingdom of Lu, a baby was born. Known as Confucius, he was born at a time when all of China was experiencing great troubles. China, an enormous country, was divided into small areas ruled by many different leaders. No two leaders agreed with one another, and instead of listening to each other, they formed large armies and fought long, tiresome wars against one another. Robbers rode through the countryside hurting other people, and greedy leaders wanted to conquer all of China for their own selfish reasons. They did not care about the ordinary people, who never had enough to eat and lived their lives in fear of their own safety. Confucius was born into a poor family more than 2,000 years ago. His father died when he was very young, but his mother believed that education was very important and made sure that he was able to learn from the many wise teachers in his village. Confucius also taught himself many subjects. He was happiest when studying history, learning all about the ways in which people lived long before he was born. He learned that China had not always been so divided. It had once been a peaceful, united country ruled by wise sages who wanted to help their people. Confucius began to dream of a time in the future when people could live in a peaceful land led by wise rulers and their sages once again. He wanted to spread the word that it was possible to live without wars and confusion. He wanted to give people hope for a better tomorrow. Confucius decided to spend his life educating others and teaching them how to live life in a more peaceful way. He began by trying to convince Chinese leaders of his ideas, but they were not interested. Although the Chinese leaders refused to listen to him, other people were eager to hear what he had to say. As he taught his students how to build a peaceful country, Confucius would often begin his lessons by asking them to start with their own families. "Do you fight amongst yourselves?" he asked. "Do you argue with your parents or steal from your brothers and sisters?" Confucius reasoned that if people could not get along in small groups, how could they expect their leaders to control the behavior of whole cities and towns? "Respect your parents," Confucius taught. "Obey them and take care of them as they take care of you. If you practice kindness in your families, then you shall also practice kindness in your communities, and kindness will spread to all people in all parts of the land." Why did Confucius begin his quest for change with families? Confucius's students would often ask him, "How should we treat one another?" His answer, always the same, sounded simple. "Never do to others what you would not like them to do to you," he replied. Do you recognize those words? Have you heard them before? These words have the same meaning as the saying, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." Many groups of people have similar sayings with the same meaning. This particular saying is often called the Golden Rule because it is believed to be a very important way for people to live their lives. Confucius believed in the Golden Rule and felt that if people always treated one another with kindness, the world would be a better place. Confucius also believed that if leaders were able to stop all wars, feed the hungry, and make sure that people were safe in their cities and towns, everyone could live in a happier world. What do you think? Do you agree with Confucius about that? These were just a few of the ideas Confucius shared with others. Confucius also believed that education was very important and tried to share this belief with many people. Confucius thought that it was necessary to continually study and learn in order to become a sage or wise person. In ancient China, as in many countries long ago, only people with money were allowed to go to school. Confucius thought that this was wrong. He believed that all people, rich and poor, should have equal opportunities to learn. Learning never stops, according to the teachings of Confucius. A wise person learns from others in and out of school. Confucius meant that although you might learn important information about history and literature in school, you could also learn a great deal about how to behave toward one another, both inside and outside of school. Have you ever heard of learning by example? If your teacher shouted all day long, then their example might make you think that this was the right way to behave. So you might begin to shout all day long too. But if your teacher spoke politely, then you might be more apt to speak politely too. You learn how to speak by example. Confucius had devoted students. After he died, some students thought that his ideas were so important that they wrote them down in a book called the Analects. This is a picture of a page from the Analects. This book formed the basis of Confucianism, a way of thinking that is practiced widely around the world today, particularly in China, South Korea, Vietnam, and Japan. Confucianism is not a religion, but a way of thinking. Schools were even created to teach the sayings of Confucius, found in the Analects. If you ever hear someone quote Confucius, perk up your ears and listen closely. You will probably hear something very wise indeed.
Alright, my friends, today we learned about a man named Confucius. What country was Confucius from? See if you can find it on my map here. What country was Confucius from? You've got it. Confucius was from China, shown in pink right here on our map. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on China. Remember, China is in the continent Asia. China is part of Asia. Alright, my friends, I've got a couple more questions. How did Confucius want to change China to become a better place? How did Confucius want to change China to make it a better place? Turn and tell your neighbor, or mom, or sister, whoever's there with you. What kind of place was China when Confucius was a child? What was it like? When Confucius was a child, the Chinese leaders often disagreed and fought constantly with each other. Ordinary folks were treated poorly, and no one felt safe. I don't think that would be a very fun place to be. I don't think that would be a fun environment to live in, and neither did Confucius. Confucius wanted China to be a place where people could live in peace without war or conflict. Where did Confucius believe that changes for a better world should begin? Where did he think you had to start to improve the world? Yes, even though in his childhood a lot of the problem was with the leaders, Confucius believed that instead of starting big with the leaders, you had to start small. So he believed that to start making the world a better place, you should start with your family. We're going to talk a little bit about Confucius's teachings. I have some questions about that. First, I want to know, why was education so important to Confucius? Why did he decide to spend his life teaching others? Why was that so important to him? You've got it. He believed that education helped people learn to treat one another with kindness and with respect. Did Confucius believe that education only happened in schools? No, he didn't. He thought that people could learn by example anywhere that they're at. And I agree with him. We do a lot of learning in school, and in your case, online at home. But just because you're not in school doesn't mean you can't learn. We learn everywhere we go. How did Confucius believe that people should live their lives? Remember, Confucius invented what we call now the Golden Rule, that you should always treat people the way that you want to be treated. He also believed that you should treat people, especially your parents, with respect. How did the followers of Confucius continue his work after he died? Remember, he had students that wrote down his ideas in a book called the Analects. Analects were used as a tool to teach Confucianism long after Confucius died. What are some things, I want you to take a minute to think about this one. What are some things that you have learned by example? So what's something that you have learned just by watching someone else do it? Not because they taught you using words, but they showed you. What's something that you've learned that way? There are a lot of things that we learn by example. One thing that I learned how to do by example was baking. Growing up, my mom loved to make, especially cookies. Cookies were her favorite. And she did a lot of baking. And I decided that I wanted to learn how to make cookies. But instead of asking my mom to teach me, I started watching her every time she made them. And I learned how to make them just like she did. Sometimes it's helpful, even when we're learning by example, to have instruction too. And I needed a little bit of that to help remember the measurements. But there were a lot of skills that I learned just by watching her. All right, my last one. I want you to turn to your neighbor or friend or whoever is there helping you today. I want you to think of a question just like we did yesterday. I want you to think of a question you could ask them about our read aloud today. But this time, I want your question to start with the word who. Ask them a question about our read aloud today that starts with the word who. And again, if they can't answer it, then it's your job to teach them. So you're going to ask them a question, and if they can't answer, you're going to teach them today. All right, my friends, we've got one more thing that we're going to do. And again, I'm going to jump over to my computer to show you what that's going to look like.
Before we go today, my friends, I want to talk about another proverb. Remember, proverbs are short traditional sayings that have been passed along orally from generation to generation. Some of them are literal, they mean exactly what they say, and some have a richer, deeper meaning. In today's read aloud, we learned about Confucius and some of his teachings. One of his teachings was, never do to others what you would not like them to do to you. Another one of his teachings said that when a leader behaves correctly, they do not have to tell people what to do in order for them to behave correctly, too. But if a leader behaves incorrectly, when they tell others what to do, people might not follow the orders because the leader does not do them. A saying that goes well with both of these teachings is, practice what you preach. This saying means that you should act the way you tell others to act. Do you think people would follow a prince's orders if he would not do those same things himself? Do you think people would have followed Confucius's teachings if Confucius did not follow them himself? Turn to whoever is helping you today and tell them about a situation when you saw someone practicing what they preached.